Sit down and grab your lunch. It's time for the Bolts Brown Bag, the only show where you make the call.
The San Diego Chargers found the road not as much to their liking as Qualcomm Stadium in a 24-19 loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. Welcome to Bolts Brown Bag, brought to you by DraftKings.com. Actually, no, we're not brought to you by DraftKings.com. Everything else in the world seems to be, though, so I just thought we'd throw it in there. Hey, probably by next week at this time, it will be if the current tide goes.
Or FanDuel or any of the other
exactly.
one-day fantasy leagues.
I'm just kind of anticipating where this is headed, right?
Yeah, I mean, they'll sponsor everything by the end of the day.
All right, I'm Ben Higgins. John Gennaro from BoltsFromTheBlue.com and the Mighty 1090 is our regular weekly co-host, and we got some stuff to discuss today, John, about the Chargers' 24-19 loss. First of all, let me thank Mike McCoy for making me correct when I picked on our podcast last week that the Chargers would lose in Cincinnati.
Selfish.
Because had he coached a little more aggressively on fourth down at the end of the first half, had a couple of things gone the Chargers' way that didn't, you very well could have been right in your prediction that the Chargers might have won. So, Coach, thank you very much for sitting on the ball at the end of the first half, not going for it on 4th and 1 in opposing territory deep. Worked well for my prediction purposes.
You're so selfish, Ben.
I know.
You're so selfish. I just want the Chargers to win. I'm feeling – it's funny. After week 1, I felt really good about my 12-4 prediction. After week 2, I feel awful about it.
Of course you do.
Because you're going to have to win some of those 50-50 games that could go either way. And I really thought this was the year that Mike McCoy was going to start coaching a little bit more aggressively, maybe pull some of those out. Doesn't appear he's changed his tune at all.
Well, let's start right there because it's something I talked about last night on Valley View Casino and Hotel Sports Extra. Twitter was all abuzz yesterday. It was the decision not to use the timeouts at the end of the first half when the Chargers forced a fourth down. Bengals were bringing their punt unit out on the team, and they could have gotten the ball back with about 45 seconds left and given Phillip Rivers a chance. But Mike McCoy said, heck with it. We're down 8. I'm good with that. Let's go to the locker room and just get this first half over with. He was asked about it after the game, but I don't know if you're going to love his explanation. Here's what Mike McCoy had to say.
It's hard enough as it is on the road to win, and you can't make the mistakes we made and beat a good football team like that. I had a lot of confidence going on the first drive, the second half, and score for the first drive. Well, I decided to do what I did.
He decided to do what he did, and he did it. And you know what? What worries me is that he said, well, I thought we'd go out and score to start the third quarter, which they did, but that should have nothing to do with the strategy at the end of the second quarter, which is entirely unrelated to the third quarter when you're getting the ball, regardless of what happens at the end of the first half.
Chip Kelly dominated college football as a head coach at Oregon and was a very good head coach with the Eagles when their roster was a little bit better. His whole philosophy was run to the ball as soon as the play is over to get more plays, to get more offensive opportunities. He figured the more offensive opportunities you had, the more points you were going to put up, the better chances you had of winning the game. Mike McCoy did the exact opposite. He said, we don't want that offensive opportunity. We don't want a chance to score more points. You can take that opportunity and whatever, we don't care about it because we're going to score next time. It makes zero sense in any way, shape, or form.
Put it this way. Were the Chargers definitely going to score there? No. I mean, there's not a lot of time. You know, could something bad have happened? Absolutely. You know, they could have fumbled. Phillip Rivers could have thrown an interception.
Right.
They could have given up more points. But was there a more than 50% chance that something good was going to happen versus something bad happening in that situation? And I think when you're talking about Phillip Rivers and the chance to run 4 to 5 plays, still with a timeout, even if you used one, that the odds are way in the Chargers' favor there. So basically you're just throwing away a situation where the odds are definitely favoring you scoring points versus giving them up.
Yeah.
A smart coach cannot be doing that in a league where 32 teams are so evenly matched over the course of a 16-game season.
Right. The margin of victory is so small for a team like the Chargers. They're not the New England Patriots. They don't win 13 games a season. They're one of those in the middle pack of, the 32 NFL teams. There's about 16 that are all in, the average range. The Chargers are there. It's obvious. They go 9-7 every year. They need to pick up wins by doing the little things, and they did the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, the little things did not go the Chargers' way. It
At
started right away with the muff punt by Keenan Allen, who, of course, usually wouldn't be in there if Jacoby Jones was healthy. So, just one of those things that doesn't go your way. Took his eye off of it.
Right.
It's going to happen. I don't love Keenan Allen in that situation anyway. He's your number one receiver. You're vulnerable to injury on punt returns. They've got to find someone other than Keenan Allen, in my mind, to be backing up Jacoby Jones, and not because he fumbled it, just because it's the smart thing to do in the long run.
Yeah, maybe the worst decision they made, outside of the timeout and the decision to kick a field goal on Cincinnati's 14-yard line on 4th and 1, maybe worse than that was Adrian Phillips, and it was twice. They added Adrian Phillips to the roster on Saturday and cut Tyrell Williams, who was probably their backup punt returner and kick returner after Jacoby Jones, who was injured. And then they decided to activate Adrian Phillips in lieu of Ryan Carruthers when they knew that the Bengals build everything off of their running offense, their rushing offense. Ryan Carruthers is that guy in the middle of the line that would prevent, what's the name of the Bengals starting running back yesterday? Not Giovanni Bernard, the guy who fumbled.
Jeremy Hill.
Jeremy Hill. Jeremy Hill was just running up the gut, running right at Sean Lissamore, Manti Te'o, Donald Butler. He was running right at them, getting 5-6 yards a pop, if not more. That's what Carruthers is for. So you got rid of your punt returner, which we saw what happened there. You got rid of also your kick returner. And at the same time, you somehow decided to activate Adrian Phillips. Like, they were so concerned with Andy Dalton in the pass offense that they decided we don't need the guy who keeps the rush, in a confined space near the line of scrimmage.
All right, if you're watching us, of course, you can use the hashtag BoltzBrownBag on Twitter if you have any questions or comments. Want to get right to it. Andrew Shirk talked about another one of those pivotal plays in the game. Asked, what's your take on the overturned fumble call on the Te'o hit of Dalton? Looked like he was tucking his arm. To me, I think the call was interpreted correctly based on the rules of the NFL. Now, I don't think Andy Dalton was trying to throw a pass in that situation. He was trying to pull the ball back in towards his body, forward at the same time, to keep Manti Te'o from knocking it out of his hand. But as the rules of the NFL state, if the arm is moving forward and the ball is knocked out, you can't really make any other determination other than incomplete pass. A really unfortunate 7-point loss for the Chargers there on what was a really great play by Te'o, and Jerry Atauchu returning it for the touchdown that got nullified.
Yeah, I try and not get too frustrated over things that I don't have any control over. When it comes to refs deciding what's a catch, what's not a catch, what's a fumble, what's not a fumble, what's a forward pass, what's not a forward pass, you really can't do anything about it. So I looked at it and I said, well, that looked like he was tucking it. It looked like it probably should be a fumble. But in that situation, you have to take whatever the refs say and just deal with it and find other ways to earn that advantage back and find other ways to try and win that game.
Dill, Triceratops 216 tweets in, besides McCoy being what he is, and he is what he is, that's for sure, I still don't believe in Reich, offensive coordinator Frank Reich. Do you agree? Okay, second season now for Reich as offensive coordinator, replacing Ken Wisenhunt. I don't have a huge problem with the Chargers' offensive game plans and play calls other than, those situations where they call the draw play on 3rd and 17 from their own 5, which always frustrates me. But I think that's more of a McCoy thing than a Reich thing. That's his personality, minimize risk. What do you think about the play calling from Frank Reich?
It's okay. I mean, they run a little bit too much on first down. They do the draw play every time it's 2nd and 10 or longer, basically giving up on the drive at that point unless Danny Woodhead wants to break a play open, which almost never happens. I think he comes up with some really creative plays. Now, where I had the issue yesterday was that Phillip Rivers looked completely unprepared. He had no idea what the Bengals were doing. Every time he snapped the ball and looked at the defense, he looked perplexed. That's on Frank Reich and that's on Mike McCoy. They're supposed to get him ready for the game so that most of the stuff he's seeing, he has seen before and he can identify. The Bengals didn't run a completely new defense. That's their standard defense. He should not have been that surprised by it. That being said, and this is the thing that is going unsaid because Mike McCoy was so bad, Chris Hairston had an awful game. The tackle who had never played guard.
Yeah, Chargers missed DJ Fluker badly.
Who filled in for DJ Fluker was awful. From the first snap to the last snap, he was awful. And that's probably what we should have expected from him. But he was going up against a Pro Bowler, playing a position he's never played before. He was dominated, did not make it easy on Phillip Rivers at all.
I think the Chargers got out-coached both offensively and defensively by the Bengals yesterday. Defensively, Hugh Jackson, of course, kind of had the Chargers number when he was the coach of the Raiders, beat him 3 out of 4 times, and then now the new offensive coordinator for the Bengals, first time they faced him in that capacity, he took over when Jay Gruden left to coach the Redskins after the playoff loss to the Chargers. Now he gets the Chargers again yesterday, and I thought, Andy Dalton didn't make any big mistakes. The Chargers would have won that game if you were right about Andy Dalton last week when you said he's just not that good of a quarterback.
Right.
He was plenty good enough yesterday with the 3 touchdown passes. A couple of them were pretty spectacular and, got away with the one fumble that got overturned, so he didn't make any big mistakes. I think the Bengals are going to win a lot of games if Andy Dalton plays like that throughout the season.
And it wasn't surprising at all because it looked a lot like the Hugh Jackson Raider teams that had Jason Campbell that were somehow beating the Chargers. How did they win? With defense, with a running game, by using their talented quarterback who sometimes makes mistakes as a game manager, basically telling him we're not gonna ask you to make any throws you can't make, and all we want you to do is avoid mistakes. Take what the defense gives you. Now, the Chargers defense was giving them a lot yesterday, but Andy Dalton never tried to force anything. When he didn't have the play, he threw it away a few times, which Phillip Rivers, I can't remember the last time Phillip Rivers threw a ball away. He's getting back into young, almost rookie quarterback habits where he's trying to force balls when the play's not there. Andy Dalton is going the opposite direction. I can see Hugh Jackson's influence all over him, which is just don't make mistakes, and we will win this game. We won't lose it because of you.
All right, he's John Gennaro from the Mighty 1090 and BoltsFromTheBlue.com. I'm Ben Higgins. We're going to take more of your comments and questions on Twitter, but something a little different. Wanted to get the perspective from Cincinnati this week. So just a couple of minutes ago, right before we started, I went in and talked to one of my counterparts at our station 9 on your side, WCPO in Cincinnati. And we're joined on Bolts Brown Bag right now by Ken Brew from WCPO in Cincinnati. 9 on your side, although, Ken, I'm not feeling like you're on our side that much after the Bengals beat the Chargers 24-19 yesterday.
Well, no, actually, after yesterday, you're on your own. Sorry.
Exactly. I thought the Bengals looked like a pretty solid team, top to bottom. Give me your impressions of the game, how Cincinnati played, and what you thought of the Chargers.
I thought Cincinnati played really well. I think it's a really well-balanced team. I think it's going to have a really good year. I mean, they're already 2-0. I don't think San Diego really has hit its stride yet, and I know there were offensive line problems. Fluker didn't play yesterday. I think once San Diego gets Antonio Gates back, it's going to be a really, really good team. But right now you can see that I don't think Rivers has his comfort zone. I think Gates is his comfort zone, and he's not there yet. But once he comes back, I think San Diego is going to be just fine. I would be surprised, and this may shock some people in Denver. I think San Diego, Kansas City, that's who's going to fight it out in that division.
Yeah, even after Denver won that Thursday night game, you could see the weaknesses in the Broncos. I mean, we could see the Chargers and the Bengals meet in the playoffs again like we did a couple of years ago. Now, of course, in Cincinnati won, there's a good chance that the Chargers would have to make that trip again. And I enjoyed your town. I visited during the playoff game a couple of years ago. It was cold, though. It was like 2 degrees when we left town. That wasn't quite as fun.
Well, and you're not old enough to remember, but it was a hell of a lot colder back in 81? I think it was when they had the freezer bowl here. So, yeah, the weather in this town gets dicey along about the middle of November. But I wouldn't be surprised either. I could see San Diego with 10 wins before it's all said and done and winning that division, and I could see Cincinnati with 9 or 10 wins and winning its division. I think the division that Cincinnati plays in is really, really tough. I think Pittsburgh is going to outscore a lot of teams, and I'm not ready to write off the Ravens at 0-2.
You had to love seeing them lose to the Raiders, though. I mean, and falling to 0-2. I mean, that just puts them behind the 8 ball the rest of the year. I think the question of me and the Bengals is that, hey, they've won about 10 games every season the last 4 years, perennial playoff team, but they can't get over the hump. What's different about this team with Marvin Lewis and Andy Dalton that makes us?
Well, one of the things I think that this team suffers from is stage fright. One of the things that happens with this team is when the lights come on, it wilts. They don't perform well on the big stage. Now, it's happened so many times that you have to believe it may be something that's going on with the coaching staff. And what that is, I don't know. Maybe they get them too uptight. Maybe they get them too hyped. I mean, I'm not enough of a coach or a psychologist to figure that out. But I do know this, that until they can get over that particular hump, until they can win a game in January, or for that matter, perform well in prime time. They've got a lot of prime time games this year. Until that happens, there will be a lot of doubts about Cincinnati. And really, it's viability when games start to count in January. A playoff win here for this team this year would be huge, but it's a huge step. And I think because of that, a lot of fans have kind of backed off buying into this thing just yet. There were a lot of empty seats in that stadium yesterday.
Interesting. Well, Ken, hopefully we'll see you one way or another in January, either back in Cincinnati or here in San Diego. Maybe you probably would cheer for here in San Diego in January, I'd imagine.
I've been to San Diego in the winter. It's one of the all-time great places in the world, and I wouldn't mind that trip at all. And the Bengals now have loosened up the purse strings, and they actually go out a day early. So that could be 2 nights in San Diego, which at that time of the year beats 10 nights here in Cincinnati.
All right, that was Ken Brew from WCPO in Cincinnati. I talked to him just a couple of minutes ago. And, yes, I am old enough to remember the Freezer Bowl game in Cincinnati. I was only like 6 at the time, but I have some vague early football memories of that. John, you are too young to remember that game.
Yeah, I believe I was 1 year old, so no memory there.
Got some more comments while we were playing that interview, and a couple of them involve Melvin Gordon, who broke off 3 runs of over 20 yards and did some really nice things. But both the questions revolve around the same thing. A Big Nick says, why didn't they keep Melvin Gordon in? He had the hot hand, makes no sense. And SD Bound Bold says, why does Gordon get less touches the better he does? So at least the perception from fans, I don't know if it's accurate or not, is that they went away from Melvin Gordon. I looked back, John, at the second half game log. He was in for the first 2 series of the second half when they scored the touchdown. And then the third series, Danny Woodhead was in primarily. 4th series, they went back to Gordon. And then the 5th series, when they scored the touchdown to Malcolm Floyd, they were with Danny Woodhead, but that was late in the game. They were way behind, and they were trying to run the kind of the hurry up, which is more of the Danny Woodhead offense. So
right.
I don't think that they went away from Melvin Gordon, at least consciously, but they were behind by double digits at some point, and you got to go to a passing game.
No, and they didn't. I looked this up this morning because it felt like he was doing a lot and then he would disappear. He was doing a lot and then he would disappear. So I looked it up, and quarter by quarter, it's almost an even number of touches every quarter. I think he had 17 touches overall. He had like 9 in the first half, 8 in the second. Really, outside of that those last 2 offensive drives where they were running more of the no huddle, which, like you said, is more Danny Woodhead style because he's a much better blocker and receiving threat out of the backfield. Before those drives, Melvin Gordon was in just about every drive for at least a run here, a run there. Most of them he was running on about half the plays. So while it seemed like they were going away from him, for the most part, Melvin Gordon was getting even touches throughout the game.
I don't want to say the Chargers weren't disappointed with the loss. They certainly were, and there was some frustration there. But if you listen to Phillip Rivers, even Melvin Gordon after the game, you saw everyone trying to put it in perspective. Here's some of the locker room comments after yesterday's 24-19 loss.
It was a good game. It was a good game. We didn't play great offensively. Our defense gave us enough chances, but we're 1-1. A lot of ball left.
We're going to go out there next week, put this game behind us after we watch film, and move on, like I said.
Now that's Melvin Gordon, and obviously he's listening to the veterans and how they're handling it. Phillip Rivers has been to this rodeo many times. He started 2-0. He started 1-1. He started 0-2.
Right.
He's not going to change who he is, how he responds based on what the Chargers' record is after 2 weeks of the season, which is a good thing, John.
Right, and I watched some of the post-game video on Mighty1090.com that Marty Caswell got. She was actually in Cincinnati. She got it herself. And everyone seemed, like you said, sort of in high spirits after the game, except for Keenan Allen, who looked like he was torn to shreds. And you can see why. They lost by 4 or 5 points, and he obviously gave up 7 by muffing that punt and then didn't have a good game to make up for it later. It really was a non-factor in the offense throughout the game and was a negative factor on special teams. You can tell that he was feeling that one. Hopefully it carries over in a positive fashion and he steps up his game and it doesn't carry over and sort of weigh him down the rest of the season.
You know, generally if Phillip Rivers is frustrated, he's going to make that known. He doesn't hide his frustration very well on the field. And I got a question in earlier. Let me see if I can find it here. Going back. Yeah, here it is from Scott, who said, 17's always animated, but at times I think I see signs that he's frustrated by some of the play calling. Do you? Well, we talked a little bit about Frank Reich's play calling.
Right.
I did notice one time, and going back to where we started the show on the discussion of Mike McCoy's decision at the end of the first half. Cameras caught, it was just maybe a second and a half cutaway of Phillip Rivers kind of looking up at the clock. You could see him looking up kind of at the scoreboard, the clock ticking down. And he kind of did a little shake of his head and a smirk like, yeah, I don't know about this. I wanted the ball back, but I want my quarterback to want the ball in that situation. That's what makes it doubly frustrating for me as a fan watching that Mike McCoy didn't give him that chance.
Right, and we can criticize Rivers, and I have criticized Rivers for those passes late in the fourth quarter to Malcolm Floyd where he was forcing it into double coverage or triple coverage at the end, which resulted in the interception. But in the first half, he wasn't making a lot of mistakes. It was, his receivers were dropping some balls, but he was mostly accurate. I don't think he threw an interception. He had the one that was sort of a fumble that maybe could have been an interception. But I saw him frustrated with his offensive line. I don't know that I saw him frustrated with the play call. Normally when he's frustrated with the play call, he can just audible to the other play they've called, and he's fine. But I think his frustration in that situation was the same as all of us, which is Rivers was having an okay game at that point. Why are you afraid to give him the ball?
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, let's get to what is quickly becoming one of my favorite parts of the show, and that is our NFL Picks contest. It's you, me, and Chris Ello, and Chris and I are hosting the NFL, our Sunday Red Zone show on the Mighty 1090 this season. So we're going to submit the picks each week. I tweeted them out this week, and we've got the scoreboard here. Now, we've got one pick is straight up, so just any winner. You don't have to worry about the point spread.
Right.
That's worth 1 point. For 2 points, you got to pick a game including the point spread, so plus or minus the points. And then the third pick is an upset pick. You've got to win straight up, call the upset, and it's got to be at least a 2.5-point underdog. So
I think I should still get a point for that last one because this is Bolt's brown bag. I just went with the team that we're here to support.
You did, and you could have won if they had just turned that one touchdown around. But no, so you went
Mike
1 and 2.
McCoy robbed me of those 3
points. You got
points.
the Dallas Cowboys, although they were probably the biggest losers of the week in the NFL.
Absolutely.
With Tony Romo going down a broken collarbone, going to miss at least half of the season.
Yep.
They might still be able to win that division, John. It looks like the NFC East is terrible this year. They've got 2 wins, divisional wins already in hand. Could they possibly go like 1-7 without Tony Romo and then have him come back and lead them to the playoffs still?
I think someone brought up this point. Their defense right now is playing fantastic, and part of that is Sean Lee, who's basically a Pro Bowl middle linebacker in the heart of their defense and the key to their defense, missed all of last season, missed most of the year before. He's back. He's playing great. Their defense is great, and they still have a great offensive line. They got about 3 or 4 really talented running backs. They're not going to ask Brandon Weeden to do a lot, and he's going to have Jason Witten to lean on a little bit. If he can lead them to 3-5, then Romo comes back. They're 5-5 with 6 games left to play. You got a shot at the playoffs at that point. I think they're still within reach of the playoffs.
Yeah, and
even with Brandon Weeden.
The Falcons helped me out. That was my upset pick, and they came from behind. The Giants have now blown 2 games in a row.
In the end of the fourth quarter.
At the end of the fourth quarter. So I'm 5-0, and we'll go 6-0 if the Colts just win tonight. They don't even have to cover the spread. So, but it's early.
Yeah.
It's still early. Long way to go in the competition. So I'll send out the new picks next week. Each week we do give out our Bolts Brown Bagger of the Game award. Goes to a Chargers player who performed, at least in my mind, kind of out of the spotlight, but did his job, brought his lunch bag, and got it done. And this week's Bolts Brown Bagger of the Game is Denzel Perryman, the second-round draft pick of the San Diego Chargers. I know, it's a surprise because you didn't even know he was basically in the game. 5 tackles, many of them on special teams. And really, he's mostly playing special teams so far. So he's not getting an opportunity in the defense, certainly not the base defense. But I like to see a guy trying to earn his way, especially in a loss like that. I wanted to pick someone a little off the radar. So 5 tackles, and I think almost all of them on special teams.
Right.
You're doing something well. You're hustling out there. You got a nose for the ball. That stood out to me on the stat sheet when I saw that yesterday with Denzel Perryman. I'm going, wow, 5 tackles. How did he get up there so quickly? All solo tackles coming on special teams.
I actually saw one of the more impressive plays of the game from him on special teams where I believe it was a punt return, and the guy was returning it. Denzel Perryman was sort of trying to chase him down. He dove at him. He hit his legs, ended up on the ground, and the guy stumbled. He didn't get tackled. He stumbled, and Perriman jumped back up, caught the guy, and tackled him again. He basically had 2 tackles in one play. Just the first wasn't as successful as the second.
So do you agree or disagree with my choice?
I disagree. My brown bagger is Ladarius Green.
All right.
Ladarius Green had a fantastic,
He
almost
did.
Antonio Gates-like game. There weren't a lot of those big plays from him down the field, but a lot of 6- and 7-yard passes where he sat down in the soft spot of the zone, picked up big first downs. He had a game that the Chargers are definitely looking at and thinking about for the future of if he can be their starter.
What are they going to do when Antonio Gates comes back, though? We have not seen the chart. We've seen many other teams in the NFL successfully work 2 tight end sets, especially 2 pass-catching tight ends. We really haven't seen it from the Chargers, at least effectively, in the last few seasons under Mike McCoy.
Most NFL coaches are going to tell you right now they have too many weapons. You can't work in another guy. Most NFL coaches are going to tell you that has a way of working itself out. Either Keenan Allen or Malcolm Floyd or Stevie Johnson's going to get injured, or Ladarius Green might get injured. There's probably going to be a spot that needs to be filled by time Gates comes back, but if everyone stays healthy, I don't know. I think maybe you use Green a little bit more on first and second down and save Gates and his energy and his old legs for more of those 3rd and 5 situations, but you can't really take a Hall of Famer and say, take a seat on the bench, you're now a specialty player. That doesn't really work.
All right, if you watched Bolts Brown Bag last year, you might remember our friend Brandon from our 10 News Cafe here. He brought out our lunches every week. And by the way, the lunches were always spectacular.
Yep.
But I really liked Brandon's football commentary as well. So I had to bring – he was off last week, but I had to bring Brandon back in.
Okay.
And I thought I'd bring him in for our 3-question segment. Ferris happens to be off this week,
Gotcha.
but he emailed in the questions anyway. So you can kind of comment along, and I'll just read off the questions. First of our 3 questions, Sunday was a day of upsets and mild surprises. Which was the biggest? John, I'll let you go first.
Battle of the quarterbacks between Johnny Manziel and Marcus Mariota, where Manziel came out looking good, got the win for the Browns. Mariota looked awful. And after we saw in week 1, he was so good that there was comparisons to Joe Montana. There was, is he the best rookie quarterback of all time? In week 2, he got his butt handed to him by that defense. He got smashed in the mouth. And meanwhile, Johnny Manziel, who everyone had given up on after his rookie season, said, no chance, never going to be a quarterback in the NFL, had a pretty good game.
Okay, Brandon, before I get your answer, update us on your football career. You're back another season?
Yes, sir.
Wide receiver?
Yes, sir.
What's the name of your team again?
The San Diego Nighthawks.
The Nighthawks,
Yes.
kind of semi-pro football?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so how have you been doing so far?
So far, we're good. We are 3-3 at the moment.
Okay.
We started off very good. Hit a few bumps in the road with some injuries and playing pretty much the state champs a few weeks ago. But other than that, we're starting off pretty strong as a first-year team.
All right, who was the biggest surprise, upset, whatever, yesterday in your mind?
The biggest upset to me would be the Raiders pulling it off in the last few seconds against the Baltimore Ravens.
It's a good one.
Yeah, Derek Carr showed that he can actually stand in the pocket and make the throws when need to be. He gave the offense that extra to show them that they can actually finish the game off.
You know, as a Chargers fan, I was kind of torn who to root for because usually I root against the Raiders, right?
Yeah, but you hate the Ravens for some reason.
Well, I don't hate the Ravens, but I felt like they might be more of an impediment to the Chargers making
Down
the
the road.
playoffs. You know, if they're both like 9-7 at the end, you might have wished they lost that game earlier in the season. Now, if the Raiders end up being good, that could be a problem for the Chargers as well in the long run.
I love it because Raider fans are happy today, and they are confident that Derek Carr is the quarterback of the future. And I don't know if any of them realize that is the worst secondary in football. The Baltimore Ravens is the worst secondary in football. And if it's not them, it's the New Orleans Saints, who Jameis Winston had a good game against. I could have a good game against those guys.
That could have been my pick for the biggest upset. Was
Jameis
the Bucs
Winston
over
against-
the
that was a
Saints.
good
But
one.
actually, I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars over the Miami Dolphins, a team that I thought was going to be pretty good this year, and they may still. There's a lot of things that happen early, but did you know that the kicker for Jacksonville, who made the 58-yarder at the end of the first half,
I
and
do
then the
know this.
go-ahead kicker is from Chula Vista?
Yes.
Myers, Jason Myers.
That's Chris's friend's son.
Yeah, he told me this last week, so I had to look it up. Yeah, I went to Modern Day Catholic down in Chula Vista, and now he's kicking for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So good for the San Diego guy, and good for the Jags. I mean, Jags, Redskins, Browns, Raiders, Bucks. Titans, Chargers. Oh, 1-1.
Yeah. And you know what? We all picked upsets that involved young, unproven quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, all three of these guys have some sort of future ahead of them.
All right, question number 2. Not 1-1, but which 0-2 team is in the best shape so far this season? Brandon, I'll let you go first on this one.
I would have to say Seattle. Even though they struggled against the Packers, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is just one heck of a quarterback. Like, he's proven that he's the best quarterback in the league, and he's going to continue to show that he can be that elite quarterback at this stage. And the Seahawks need to just get everything going, get what they had last year, the mojo back and everything, so they can actually get back to where they were.
There's not that many 0-2 teams out there.
Yeah.
And to me, it's got to be Seattle. They haven't played at home yet where they dominate.
Right.
I mean, they've had 2 road games, a tough, close loss to a divisional rival, understandable, and then losing at Lambeau Field to Aaron Rodgers, who I couldn't believe the stat yesterday. He has not thrown a home interception since 2012.
That's amazing.
Right.
That's stunning.
Right. And I think over that course it was like 600 pass attempts at home without an interception. I mean, he's fantastic. My pick was also Seattle, but I kind of want to go a little bit against the grain. But really, the team that I feel like might end up 0-2 and people are going to panic, but they're going to be really good and probably make the playoffs in the end, is the Colts. But they would have to lose tonight to the Jets for that to happen.
What about the Eagles? Are they 0-2?
The Eagles are 0-2.
And now they don't have Tony Romo to worry about anymore. The Giants are also 0-2 in that division. The Eagles might actually be, when you look long-term, they just look so bad yesterday.
They got to get their run game going. They got to.
I mean,
DeMarco Murray, oh my goodness.
DeMarco Murray looks terrible. Ryan Matthews looked good in week 1. He had 1 carry yesterday. And Sam Bradford looks worse than the guy we saw with the Rams. Everyone figured, you throw him in Chip Kelly's offense, he's going to be fine, or at least he's going to be better. This is as bad a football as he's played in his whole career. I just don't like the Eagles to be more than an 8-8 team this year. But I can totally see the Jets pulling out a win tonight and then the Colts turning it around because the Jets have a good defense.
All right, the final question from our Bengals fan, Ferris, is
no.
directed solely for John.
Oh, no.
Now that you've seen my Bengals up close and personal, do you care to revise some of the rash inaccuracies you made last week on the Squadcast? Feel free to weave an apology in there.
I believe I made no such inaccuracies, unless he's talking about when I said the Bengals stink. Which they
don't. I did not see a glaring weakness on that team. If Andy Dalton plays well,
right,
I didn't see a weakness on that team. They've got a good secondary. Mm-hmm. They're good in the trenches. They've got good running backs. They've got good receivers. I mean, that is as complete a football team as you might find in the NFL right now.
By the way, they were without their best pass rusher.
Wow.
Montez Burfitt, whatever.
From Arizona State.
Yeah, I think he's missing the first month of the season. So they're going to add him in a couple weeks as well.
You were wildly wrong on the Bengals stink. They don't stink.
What I said was Andy Dalton stinks and there's not enough around him. Where I was wrong is there's plenty around him.
Yet as impressive as they are in depth, the Chargers were 1 play away from winning that game.
Right.
1 play away. So
I
don't forget that, Chargers
I don't think they're leaps and bounds ahead of the Chargers. But on Sunday, they were the better coach team. Hugh Jackson did a great job of managing what he had, playing to his strengths, avoiding his weaknesses, and the Chargers, unfortunately, were starting a tackle at guard.
All right. I mean, you're right. You're right. That was a problem.
Yes, they don't stink. They're about as good as the Chargers. Okay. So they're good. I don't think they're great, but they're good.
Brandon, I know Chef Charles is probably calling you back inside. Yeah. Where is that guy? Thanks for stopping by for our 3 questions.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again.
I just want to point out, you asked Brandon about his team. Not once did he mention his own stats, how his season's going. Just the team. No ego on this man at all.
Yeah, I like to be humble and yet hungry, so
I like it.
8 to 10 catches a game, averaging about 100 yards.
I wish. Right. Chargers might have to sign me with those kind of stats.
We Chargers need a punt returner.
He's got the equivalent of
might be able to.
He's got like Andy Dalton.
Might have to try out.
That's not a good thing. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you for having me.
Let's finish up, John, by looking ahead to next week and the Minnesota Vikings. The return of Norv Turner, offensive coordinator of the Vikings. First time he's game planned against the Chargers since they fired him. That's kind of one of the plots. Certainly, Adrian Peterson is another one. I mean, if, Giovanni Bernard is running all over the Chargers, then Adrian Peterson certainly is going to be able to do a little bit of damage, I would think, on the road again for the Chargers next week. And he had 134 rushing yards yesterday, caught a couple passes for 58 yards, scored his first touchdown since before the suspension. So he's kind of back in the swing of things. Teddy Bridgewater has been, I thought, the best of the rookie quarterbacks last year.
Yeah, probably.
So this is a dangerous Minnesota Vikings team, one that thinks that it can be a playoff team at the end of the season.
Well, and this is really what it comes down to, and this is what today is all about, and it's kind of why we're all miserable. The Chargers fired Norv Turner. They hired Mike McCoy. It was supposed to be a drastic improvement. I think there's been some improvement, but overall you're getting mostly the same team. You're getting about 8-8, 9-7 every year, and incredible inconsistencies. They show up to some games with great game plans. They completely dominate. They push teams around on the line. And then the next week they come out looking unprepared. They get pushed around on the lines. They don't know what they're doing. That was the same thing with Norv Turner as it was with Mike McCoy. And Norv's Minnesota Vikings offense, kind of the same thing. They could come out and put a 40 or 50 spot on this Chargers defense. That's how good their potential is. They could also come out and score 6 points. I'm not really going to be surprised either way because of how inconsistent both teams are.
That's going to be an interesting one because, remember, the Vikings are building their new stadium, so they're still playing outdoors at the University of Minnesota Stadium.
Not that cold yet.
It's not that cold yet, but it'll be a natural grass turf. You won't be playing in that weird Metrodome environment that the Chargers played in the last time they went to Minnesota when Adrian Peterson ran for, 296 yards?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
That was the game Antonio Cromartie returned the field goal.
Yeah.
109 yards for the touchdown to set the NFL record.
Not a fun game despite that
No,
play.
it was not a fun game. We will see what happens. Chargers and the Vikings. We will be back with another edition of Bolts Brown Bag next Monday at 12:30. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your lunch. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. For John Gennaro, I'm Ben Higgins. Take care.